as South Africa continues to celebrate the International Criminal Court, or should I say the International Court of Justice ruling on the deadly Israel-Hamas conflict. There are fears of possible economic backlash from Israel's allies. The African National Congress says it stands by its government stance on the ongoing conflict, despite the potential economic consequences against South Africa. On Friday, let's remind you that the ICJ ruled in favor of South Africa, calling on Israel to prevent acts of genocide. So, what does this ICJ ruling mean for South Africa's global relations? Let's speak now to Oscar van Heerden. He is a senior research fellow for African diplomacy and leadership at the University of Johannesburg. Mr. van Heerden, good morning to you and thank you very much for your time. You argue in your piece that appeared today in News 24, that platform, you argue that one does not have to be a brilliant legal mind to know that the ICJ effectively ruled for a ceasefire. I want to start with that question because there's been many discussions about whether the court did indeed say this, but in another language. In your considered view, why did the court avoid the words ceasefire?
Thanks, Polly. I think the court avoided the usage of the word ceasefire because not all the parties involved in this conflict stood before the court. Remember, this was an application against Israel and the Israeli government. And so Hamas and other people that are involved in the fighting was not before the court. So it would have been unfair for the court to say there must be a ceasefire when only one party to the conflict is present. And as a result, because the application was brought against Israel, the court confined itself to speaking about measures that Israel has to implement. And so I agree with the analysis of Naledi Pandor, the Minister of International Relations, when she says that if indeed Israel and the Israeli Defense Force implement Article 2 of the Convention, which, among other things, says no one member of the group must be killed, there must be no bodily and mental harm and trauma, and so on and so forth. If you implement those, and you also must allow humanitarian aid in to the affected areas. Now, if you do all those things, it cannot happen when there is continuation of shootings and bombings and so forth. And so effectively the court was saying, implement these, and if you do it properly, there will be a ceasefire.
You also say in your article, now that Israel has been associated with the charge of genocide, the implications are untenable for countries who support it and who continue to support the Netanyahu government in its war against Hamas. I'd like for you to expand on the simple meaning of untenable implications.
Thanks. I talk about untenable because even though the Netanyahu government might ignore the ruling from the ICJ and continue fighting and killing women and innocent women and children in Gaza, even though they might do that, I think countries like the United States, Germany, the United Kingdom and others will have to take a moment of pause as to whether they want to openly continue being associated with aiding and abetting Israel, because otherwise they make a mockery of the World Court, as the ICJ is known for. They have in the past, these countries, supported the rulings of the court and have stressed that its rulings are binding, and so they can't now, because it is Israel, turn around and say, but we are making an exception. I think that will be the highest level of hypocrisy. I think the Global South will see it for what it is, and it will delegitimize institutions, respected institutions, such as the International Court of Justice.
In the body of your article, and I'm literally going word for word in what you have written there because it's quite incisive. You say South Africa's application at the ICJ and the subsequent verdict have embarrassed the Joe Biden administration and the U.S. Congress, and they won't stand for it. Before you answer that question, the ANC, it does seem that they are, if you like, they are alive to the possible realities of what could be the consequences here. Can we just take a moment to listen to the ANC's first Deputy Secretary General, Nomvula Mokonyane, talking exactly on the possible consequences here?
We knew that the action that we have taken and that we fully support will actually have those who will feel disappointed by us, but ours is a principled position that we took. But we are also quite aware that the support to the ANC-led government has also been overwhelming and beyond just one or two countries. At some point, we will share with you that kind of support. We all need each other when it comes to economic opportunities and investments. We are a market, and we also are a highly resourced country with our rich minerals and capabilities, as well as with many other new friends. It can be correct that when we take a decision that is a decision informed by our own life experience, we can then be threatened. But we do believe that through our own relationship with those countries, we shall engage them, we shall persuade them, we shall make them to appreciate. But of course, as what Comrade President had said in France, we're not beggars. We also are a fertile ground for other economies to grow.
Mr. Van Heerden, it may not be raising questions of economic trade in the middle of a very dire situation unfolding in Gaza. 70% of people who have died there are women and children. So for some people, it just is, it's not something that is worth even discussing at the moment, the issues of economic trade. But these are the realities as you've written in your piece. You've heard the ANC. Your thoughts on what the possible consequences could be for South Africa economically?
Yes, so I talk of embarrassment for the Biden administration and Congress because you'll recall, Polly, that it's Congress, more than 200 members of Congress actually indicated that they thought that South Africa's application is baseless, it's meritless, and factually not correct. And unfortunately, the court has now ruled in South Africa's favor, embarrassing Congress and members of Congress, including the Biden administration. And so I make the point that they are certainly not going to take that sitting down. There are going to be repercussions, and it is likely, not immediate, but there will be repercussions because we've decided to embarrass the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, as well as the Israelis. And so I do think there's going to be blowback. As to whether the South African government and the ANC-led government is ready for that blowback, we will have to see. We don't know what form it will take, but I do mention a few examples in my article where I talk, for example, of the fact that the AGOA agreement with the United States still needs to be ratified by Congress. There was a workshop, a session, blows were exchanged. There was agreement on the agreement, and that was now taken back to the United States. As to whether the Congress will ratify it in lieu of the ruling from the ICJ, we will have to wait and see. We also have bilateral trade agreements with the United Kingdom and with the European Union. These are big trading partners. As to how they are going to punish South Africa, we will have to wait and see. But I'm simply making the point that they are not going to not do something.
Well, Oscar van Heerden, let's leave it there, because how you end your article, in fact, is on the very points you are making now. And the question is, that ominous question is, are we ready for the impending onslaught? Oscar van Heerden opining there on the possible consequences of what we have chosen to do as South Africa for human rights in the world.